Good afternoon and welcome to the second in the series of the Resilient Growth Playbook. Last week, we had the brilliant Roelof Hengst on, who is a multiple founder, going from winning by design to magnesium and back to AI. And this week, very excited to introduce Royden Greaves, who is the founder of Jarvis, which I'm very excited to talk to you about. I will hand over to him in a second to introduce himself properly. But just as a reminder, we started this series based on the success of last year, where we talked about sustainable growth. And really, in a world where we're not really sure what's happening in terms of economy, in terms of funding, our focus has really gone from growth at all costs to creating a business that's going to sustain anything that's thrown in our paths. And how can we grow knowing we're putting our money in the most efficient and effective way possible. So Royden, please talk about how you got to launching Jarvis and your journey on the way.
Well, firstly, Lucy, thank you very much for having me today. Really appreciate it. To yourself and your wider team. And it was absolutely amazing working with you in the early days of Jarvis. I'm Royden Greaves, and I'm the founder and CEO of Jarvis, and we're a workplace pension solution that's designed to help individuals not only have an understanding of what their pensions look like today, but more importantly, what their lifestyles will look like in the future. And to do that, what we wanted to have was two things that were easy. Easy for employers to use via payroll software providers, and easy for members to understand. So a pension that's for the first time as easy to use as your modern day banking solution.
Brilliant. And how did your experience in wealth management lead to deciding to jump from, the comfortable world into entrepreneurship?
Great question. Having worked in wealth management for 15 years and probably being the only member of a senior leadership team that I'm aware of in the workplace pension ecosystem, one thing was really, really evident. And that is all people want to achieve the ability to be self-sufficient, the ability to look after themselves. And pensions, through my experience, I learned that pensions was the second largest store of private wealth in this country, second only to property. And when you look at the fact that these type of accounts are the largest accounts that most people have in their lives in terms of account balances, but they have the least amount of understanding, it was evident that I needed to bring the knowledge that I had from a wealth management standpoint to show people not only how to manage the wealth that they have, but more importantly, for most of us in society, how do you actually build new wealth? How do you accrue new wealth? And with over 36 billion pounds of lost money out there, so that's about £10,000 on average per person. And with auto enrollment, where individuals contribute hundreds of pounds of their money into accounts on a monthly basis, I think it's imperative that they understand what that money means for them as individuals, but also for their wider family over time. And having something like Jarvis, which is built on the whole concept of, throughout history, jars have been used to store things of value. And for us, we're trying to help people to have more clarity and visualize what those things of value actually mean for themselves. So that's where the whole jar visualization, Jarvis, comes from. And we started on a mission to simplify money. Let's just call it money for people at all stages of their lives. And we started with pensions. And we wanted to make sure that that's simple and easy for them to not only understand, but for it to be impactful in their lives. And so that's why it was important for us to just start Jarvis.
Completely agree. It's something that I have never really truly understood, even after years of working in fintech. And was there a particular moment that sparked your decision to go from being really interested and understanding there's a problem to thinking, yes, actually, I'm going to be the one that fixes this?
Since 2016, I thought that life should be easier for people. Since 2016, I thought that even with the advisory world, we have individuals that tend to be a lot more financially educated, is still very complex. Really and truly, if you think about all the goals you have, all the things you want to achieve, it could be dialed back to a simple number. And in wealth management, we built all of our processes around that. So rather than saying, hey, you need to save this or save that or do this, do that, we could tell you, for you to be financially independent, you need an amount of money. Let's just call it, for the purpose of this conversation, £200,000. Now, if you look at your bank account and you're like, hey, I've got £1,000 and that's all I have to my name, that number is very scary. But if I broke that number down to say, don't worry, if we save, for example, £100 a month for the next 30 years, and I'm not saying that that math is absolutely correct, but just as an example, that becomes a lot more engaging. So being able to take complex information and distill it down to some simple outcomes, I thought that's common sense. That's what the industry should do. Now, skip forward many, many years beyond that original thought process and realize it's not done, but yet you have around 90 billion a year going into pensions, and that's people's largest store of wealth, or second largest to property, but liquid wealth, let's say, semi-liquid. I just felt like, let's try and do something about that, because most of the people who need the most support have the least amount of financial education, have the least amount of financial guidance associated with them. So I just thought I'd take on the challenge, myself and an amazing team, to be that source of truth.
Brilliant. And as we know, every startup evolves, and you're very clear on what is the problem you're trying to solve and what is the outcome you want to get to. But what has the biggest pivot been so far? And, we all should have pivots, because as you dig into it, you work out a different route. So we'd love to understand that sort of journey over the last few years, that you've gone from going, right, this is the problem, to actually this is the right solution, and finding the right solution.
Well, I think in life, as things evolve, and I want to use that word evolve rather than pivot, you could always look back and say that there's been big change. And that's true not just in our lives, but you can look at nature, whether it's a seed becoming a small plant, becoming a huge tree, and then bearing fruit. Like, they're all extremely different. And you could say that that seed pivoted into becoming a tree and it pivoted into bearing fruit. You can say the same thing of animals, like how a butterfly starts. So our form naturally has to change and evolve as we get more information, as we learn more. And what we realized on our journey is we wanted to make sure that we added value to the everyday individual that work in society, all levels of society. And we wanted to make sure that the 38 million people that's out there that's adding value to our country, through the work that they do, are held in a meaningful way. And initially, we thought that the best way to speak to them is to simply go out there and tell these individuals that, here's the solution to some of the issues that you've been having. And what we've learned from that process, and we've done really well through that process, is to make sure that we build something that they understand. And that's why I said earlier that is a pension as easy to understand as any modern banking app. Because we all know, I'm using all in a colloquial context here now, that we know how to receive money in a bank account, we know how to send money in a bank account, we know how to pay some bills and withdraw from account. We understand how to use it. So if we can mirror that process as closely as possible, which is what we spent many, many months doing, we know that the end people understand it. So we created a lifetime pension that's usable by a single individual or a enterprise organization. From that, we then realized that in terms of the next stage of our evolution, we needed to make sure that we engage with them at the center of money. The center of money, from a salary perspective or payment standpoint, is in some sort of software, most times, like some payroll software, some accounting software. So making sure that those understood us and how we work within our niche, which is focused on the temporary workforce in this country. That was the next part of the evolution, in making sure that the employer experience was seamless, second to none. And we've gone some way in achieving that. We then made sure that we speak to them at scale. And that's through payroll software partners, make sure that the life for the employers is very easy and very simple to understand.
Brilliant. So you've recently raised, and congratulations. What's your focus as you grow now? What's the core channels that you're thinking about when you're thinking about building this sustainable growth framework for Jarvis?
Well, I think the first thing to do from our standpoint, which we've done, is to understand very well who you're trying to speak to. So ideal customer profile or technical language around that. Well, if you make it very simple, like, who is it that I'm trying to help? Who is it that we're trying to help? And who will best receive that help? That's the first thing. And for us, we wanted to focus on the contingent workforce because they have statistically the least amount of support in this country. So rather than building a solution that was designed for the rich, building a solution that was monetized by the rich, what we wanted to do was to take the lessons from the solutions that are designed and built for the rich to enable the individuals who are aspiring towards wealth to become more financially independent. And that's why we started with the contingent workforce in this country. So the individuals who are self and near self-employed, and certainly the underemployed in terms of remuneration. And as we go down that road, what we looked at was working with umbrella companies, employees of record, looking at temp recruitment agencies, and the individuals and the companies that service that market, and forming very close partnerships and relationships with them. And I'm pleased to say that we now work with all the leading payroll software providers that service that industry, meaning that we now speak to them at scale, and we'll continue to do so. We then have several other verticals that we're going to be focused on once we become the de facto lead provider in this vertical, which we're well on the way to do. And as we continue expanding, what will always remain true is serving the people that need the most help, that have the smallest voice many times, but need the most support. And that's our North Star, and that's not going to ever change.
Brilliant. And how do you think about growth in terms of finding these? So your real route to market is through partnerships. And how do you identify the right partners, and how have you found the best route to really be able to get in contact with them and create relationships with them and help them to understand the value of bringing Jarvis into their
Well, for us, we wanted to find out who are the trusted standards within our industry. So what I mean by that is who are the organizations that the target market that we look at, say in terms of our customers who are employers that service this industry, who do they all have an affiliation with, and who do they see as a standard of trust? And for us, it was the FCSA and Professional Passport. SafeRec is another one as well. And making sure that our systems and solutions meet those standards, making sure that we add value starting at that level. So when we then have conversations with our target market has the assurance, the understanding that we not only understand the industry, but we're adhering to the best of standards within that space. By default, that also gives us a clear understanding of who is within that space, because they all say, rightly so, that they're accredited by one of these professional bodies, because that is a standard that effectively the employees and the various workers know that things have been done that's in their best interest, and every process is done with overall good outcomes in mind. So we went about finding out who are the trusted bodies and the trusted standards within that space. What are the issues that exist within the space? How could we solve those issues? Make sure we're doing that properly, and making sure that we now become accredited, which we are. So we're the most accredited pension provider in the space now. And so when we're speaking to the customers, we're speaking from a position of trust, a position of integrity and authenticity around everything that we do. But to the end member that the employers serve, make sure that we speak with simplicity, kindness, and an understanding of what they're trying to achieve overall.
Brilliant. I think that's so important. And how do you have a marketing toolbox, as it were, to go to each of these partners, with your tone of voice and your messaging? And is that what you've developed to be able to go in and really build that trust and make it as easy for your partners as it is for anybody else to come onto the platform?
Yes. So once we understand who we're speaking to, there's a very specific set of tools that we use to onboard a partner and make sure that the partner is empowered with the right collateral to speak to their clients who are ultimately employers. When you go to a doctor, about a very, very specific issue, most times, hopefully one, whenever you need to turn up. And the reason why you try and be as specific as possible is to make sure that the doctor brings a solution for you that solves your pain. Most times there's some sort of pain, emotional, physical, right? Which we could all relate to. And with us, it's no different. The employers have a certain level of pain. That pain relates to either opting out and the ease of doing that, the pain of processing payments via pension solution. That's very simple and easy to understand. The pain of someone, for example, leaving employment and rejoining and having multiple things to try and bring together, which creates complexity. So the various pain points that employer has, like salary sacrifice, is something that's underutilized within the country across all employers, where the government is effectively saying, as it stands today, and this could change, but right now is saying, hey, if you set up your pension in a specific way, you do not need to pay the additional 15% employer's NI on the element that goes into the pension. Instead, that's business savings, or more importantly, savings for the member. Why wouldn't you do that? You wouldn't do it because sometimes it's very complex to do. It requires extra work. With Jarvis, that's done automatically. So by understanding their pains, when we communicate based on pains. These are the pains that we know you have these pains because we understand the systems and solutions that you're currently using. Now, historically, you couldn't do anything about it, is what it is. Now you can. Here's the alternative, and here's what it looks like. This is how you transition to it without going through any significant pain of migration. And this is the benefits to your members. So make sure that that communication is easily digestible, easy for our team to communicate with partners and partners to communicate with the clients that they serve. Is something that we have in our overall toolkit. Yes, there's a standard toolkit that we use to roll out. It's consistent, it's repeatable, it's scalable. It's something that was very important. It took time to build, but now it's built. Extremely useful resource for us.
Brilliant. I'm sure it's tweaked and optimized at every new partnership you bring on. What does that, for the end user, what does that Jarvis journey look like now? Creating that sort of simplicity at every stage, I'm sure.
Well, our clients, the employers, what Jarvis looks like is a common sense approach to pensions as opposed to a university approach to pensions. What that means is ultimately an employer needs to, by law, move money from their business bank account to an employee's account. That account is a pension account, but it's still an account. So what do you need to do that? You need to tell the pension company that that person exists. They call that enrollment. You need to be able to tell the pension company how much money you want to send across so they could expect it. They call that contribution. You need to send the money. It's called a payment. And by the way, some members don't want to be part of that and they want to opt out. So there's some member requests that you need to acknowledge. Yes, no, for whatever reason that you're willing to do something or not. So member requests. And by the way, there might be some historical stuff that you need to find that you've done. Search. That's it. That's Jarvis. That's the employer experience. So it's really easy to understand the outcome that you want to be doing. Integrate seamlessly with payroll software, so your workload is often reduced. And when we are not integrated with payroll software, we could take a single file that says, some new people. Have we seen them before? No. If we haven't, we'll add them. And if we've seen them before, no problem. We'll make a note and we'll take the contributions for them. So rather than having to do these multiple processes, it's one process. It's simple. From the end member standpoint, for those who want to opt out, you don't need to know Pythagoras theorem and to find all your details from some crazy letters. Like in our emails, like a quick click captures all your details, brings it into our system. You go through the process to opt out without you needing to know significantly more about yourself than a medical surgeon would. And if you choose to engage, because that's what you want to do for yourself, you come into an app that feels like one of your standard bank accounts. What do I want to do? I want to know what my future looks like. No problem, we could tell you. We use lots of data points to do that, but we could tell you. And more importantly, we could give you some guidance as to what you need to do to live the future that you want to be a part of. We think that's cool.
I think so too. What do you think your biggest lesson is that you've learned so far on this entrepreneurial roller coaster of a journey?
I think the lesson that we continue to learn is the importance of using the word failure to your benefit and iterate through things that don't work very quickly. I think sometimes people take too long to learn lessons. The faster you can learn lessons, it means that the more lessons that you have in your Rolodex to refer to at some point in the future. So I think as a team, being willing to try and being willing to accept that some of the things that you try don't work in the way you intend for them to work, but it's still information that's useful to the next thing that you try. And you iterate very, very quickly. You cycle through nodes as fast as you possibly can, because like if you use like someone like Thomas Edison, which without him and him cycling through 1,000 nodes, that's a lot. I haven't done that, right? Without him cycling through 1,000 nodes, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing here today, because electricity in the current form would not be invented potentially. And in terms of the concepts of being able to move through nodes quickly, I would say that as a team, that's the thing that we've used as one of our key assets in building Jarvis.
Yeah, definitely. I just think this concept that we've all got to get onto is if you only do things you already know that are going to work, you're not going to move forward. You're just going to move backwards because you're going to get in ever decreasing circles. So we've got to keep trying and to keep, from everything from us wanting to grow and scale to us wanting to keep interested in what we're doing is to keep
Yes.
pushing. And I think it's such an important point. And have you ever, we'd love to know, because obviously you're a very entrepreneurial person, so I'm sure there are quite a few things up your sleeve. What else would you, if you weren't doing Jarvis, what do you think your next business would be?
I think that everything that I do, everything that I pursue throughout my career is built on the foundations of one word, and that's freedom. So whatever I do now or in the future will help individuals to obtain some degree of freedom. And whether that's freedom with how they live in terms of like finances, freedom in terms of how they travel, like holidays and how they enjoy that side of life, or freedom in terms of how they get themselves out of financial constraints like debt. It'll be based around something like that. That is one of the most important things for me. I love seeing people do well. I love seeing people achieve things. And a lot of times, the limiting factor with us being willing to pursue new things, pursue the answers to life's big questions, is the feeling of entrapment, the feeling that you're not free to do something because you're limited by a career, you're limited by income, you're limited by circumstances. And helping someone to see beyond those limitations and understand how to achieve again, how to win again, and how to win for the first time in some instances will always be at the core of my heart. So if I wasn't doing Jarvis at some point in the future, whatever I do would be based around helping people to be free.
We'd love just to know, how should people find out more about you and Jarvis and anything else? Where should they go?
So I still struggle, but I still respond to every single LinkedIn request for information or message saying anything, but someone wants to get in touch. So LinkedIn, so Royden Greaves, and you could certainly share my details. I will respond. It might take me slightly longer than normal now, but it's one of the things. I love people and I love hearing people's stories and I love helping wherever I can. So if I have someone in my network that can help someone to build something or achieve something, I'll make the introduction. If I know an investor that can help someone along the way, I'll introduce them. If it's an employer that's actually looking to improve their pension solutions, well, why shouldn't they? That one's a default. So that's an easy way to get in touch with me. Probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. And for me, I think that one of the things that I'm very thankful for is having a platform to speak on behalf of the people that we serve. And we will continue to fight the cause of financial inclusion and financial fulfillment for the people that we serve and the people in society. We'll continue to do that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Royden. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for your time today.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me again.
Speak to you soon.